I began my career in selling, knocking on doors, going from door to door. So I know about prospecting, lead generation, and conversion rates. And as the old saying goes, nothing happens until a sale takes place. And we talked before about the most important part of selling, which is high sales. McKinsey and Company did a multi-million-dollar study nationwide for IBM when they were having problems, and they came back and they said, "We found your problem." And they said, "What's the problem?" They said, "The problem is low sales." And they said, "What's the solution?" The solution is high sales. And so what they found is that the key to business success is high sales. The reason for business failure is low sales. And when they asked business owners, interesting point, is how important are sales to you? They did a research study on this as well. And business owners will say, "Oh, very important. Most important thing of all, nothing more important than sales. It's the lifeblood of the business. It's the oxygen to the brain," and so on. They said, "Well, great. Well, how much of your time do you spend on sales and revenue generation?" I would say, "Oh, all the time." And so I think of it all day long. We work on it. Well, good. They said, "Well, let us just follow you around with a camera and a stopwatch and sort of track your time usage." And after about a month, what they found was that the average entrepreneurial, small, mid-sized business owner spends 11% of their time in sales, on average. 11%. Everything else is taken up with meetings and conversations and lunches and email and electronic interference or interruptions and reading the newspaper and so on. They were absolutely shocked. They're absolutely shocked. You're just simply not spending enough time on sales. Now, I have a good friend who started a business at his kitchen table with two others, and they were just simply offering a business-to-business service. They had been offering it with another company, and the company shut down. So they said, either we just pack it up or we create our own business to offer the same services, and they did. And last year, they did more than $2 billion in sales. They have 3,000 employees. He flies around in a private jet, one of the richest men in America. And I asked him, I said, "Well, how do you define your job?" He said, "I'm the chief sales officer." "And how about your two partners?" "They are also chief sales officers." That's all we do is sales. That's all we think about is sales. And that's why the business is so successful. It's because the top people are focused like laser beams on sales. So the starting point of the sales process, sometimes we look upon this as a funnel where you put things in the top and then they go down. And sometimes we look at it as a pipeline or a production line where there's simple steps. The starting point is always prospecting. The starting point is always to find people who can and will buy your product or service within a reasonable period of time. So we say rule number one for sales success is spend more time with better prospects. Spend more time with better prospects. Sometimes I ask my business owner clients, and I do seminars on business growth all over the world. I say, why do you get up in the morning? What is the purpose of getting up in the morning and going to work? I mean, why do you go to work at all? And after they think about this for a while, they finally agree that they go to work so that they can make money, and ideally make more money. So I call this the triple M philosophy, make more money, MMM. So how do you make more money? Well, that's SMS, and SMS is sell more stuff. You make more money by selling more stuff. And so therefore I say, well, your purpose in going to work is to make more money, and that the way you make more money is you sell more stuff. So if you're not selling more stuff, then you're really not working. You might as well stay at home in bed. Is that correct? And they're shocked. Yes, but what about all the little things that we do? No. Everything else you do is irrelevant in comparison with making more money. So every company that is a successful company, and this is based on the work that Neil Rackham has done, millions of dollars of research, the biggest and best companies in the world, they have literally an obsession, a focus with making more money, with calling on more people, with prospecting, and increasing prospecting levels. Now, Dominic and I were talking a little while ago about the strategy used by Franklin Covey to build their business from $0 to $50 million a year, and over the course of 2 decades to more than $1 billion in sales in corporate training. And it's what we call FaceTime. And I've been teaching this forever, and whether they got it from me or not. But basically the concept is that there is one number that more predicts the success of your sales and the future of your business than any other number, and it's the number of minutes that you spend face-to-face with prospects each day, the number of minutes that your clients spend. And with Franklin Covey, they have this number, and every single day they measure how many minutes did you, the sales professional, spend face-to-face with a prospective client. how many minutes each day. And they are forced to take accurate records, and the records are reported country by country and nation by nation and worldwide. And people are promoted, paid, advanced based on the number of minutes that they spent. Now, I've encouraged this for years because according to Columbia University, the average sales professional in America or worldwide spends less than 90 minutes a day with customers. And all the rest of the time is spent warming up and warming down. And 90 minutes is the average, which means half of salespeople spend less than 90 minutes and half spend more. So the question is, how about you? How about your salespeople? It's absolutely astonishing how many little useless activities salespeople can dream up to avoid the hard work of calling on customers. Because it's what what Daniel Pink calls the ocean of rejection, is that when you start to call on customers to offer your products or services, you get an ocean of rejection, like a tsunami. The rejection is sometimes so overwhelming that salespeople do everything possible to avoid rejection, and the best way to avoid rejection is don't talk to those people that reject you. Find an excuse not to talk to people. So now it gets down so the average salesperson makes about 2 sales calls a day. 2 a day, spends less than 90 minutes, and all the rest of the time is traveling and making excuses. So spend more time with better prospects. Now, what is a good prospect? Well, what we find is that the most important work that you do as a business owner, a salesperson, a coach, a consultant, is thinking. And thinking means thinking before you act. Think in advance. What is it that you are going to do, and why are you going to do it? We say a stitch in time saves 9. Every minute that you spend in thinking and planning saves 10 minutes in work and execution. So what you do is the first thing you think about is, who is an ideal prospect for me? Who is the perfect prospect? I've worked with salespeople who spend an enormous amount of time answering this question, and then when they actually go out and make calls, first thing they do is they ask a couple of questions to make sure that this person is an ideal prospect, that if this person is satisfied with the discussion and the explanation, this person can and will buy and pay within a reasonable period of time. So we say that a good prospect is someone who wants what you're selling, who needs what you're selling, who can use what you're selling, and who can pay for what you're selling. They must meet all 4. If they meet the first 3 but they can't pay, this is not a good prospect. I have salespeople say, geez, I spoke to a good prospect today. Of course, he has no money, but if ever he did, he would be perfect for us. No, this is not a good prospect. This is a 0 prospect. If they don't have any money, they're not a good prospect. So a prospect can be defined as someone first of all, has a problem that your product or service can solve. This is kind of the fundamental principle. We call it the problem to be solved, PTBS. PTBS, problem to be solved. What is the problem that the customer has that they will pay you to take away? Let me repeat. What is the problem that the customer has that they will pay you to take away? And my favorite word in selling is clarity. So in customer acquisition, you must be clear about the problem that your product or service solves. Sometimes we call this the value offer, and sometimes we call it the unique added value. But the key to selling, according to Neil Rackham and his work, is that there must be a disparity between what you are offering in terms of the benefits and what the customer is experiencing. If the customer sees that there's a big difference between how much they pay and how much they get, the sale is made automatically. So in terms of solving the problem, the bigger and more expensive the problem, the more valuable your solution. The second is the need that your product or service can satisfy. Remember, customers have needs. Sometimes they're conscious needs, sometimes they're unconscious needs, and one of your jobs in the sales situation is to uncover those needs through questioning. By the way, here's the rule, is the more time you take discussing problems and needs with a customer before you ever mention your product or service, the easier the sale will be. The biggest mistake that salespeople make, and the biggest objection that customers have, is they say, hello, how are you, and launch right into a discussion of the product or service, instead of taking the time to understand. Now, the third is the customer has a goal that your product or service can help them to achieve far faster and with greater efficiency and consistency and dependability than they could on their own. Remember, the customer has to be here, and you have to offer them to be here. And what they do is they buy this difference between the two. They buy the gap. In selling, sometimes we call this gap analysis. What is the gap between where the customer is and where the customer could be with your product or service? And the fourth way of qualifying a prospect is, what is the pain that they have that your product or service can take away? What is the pain or concern? What keeps them awake at night, if you like? If you could, sometimes we say, if you could wave a magic wand and just eliminate one major problem or aggravation in your life, what would it be? If you can show the customer how to take that away, then they will pay you almost anything. Look at the weight loss industry, by the way. That's a perfect model. They say, here's where you are today, very high weight. Here's where you can be in the future, thin, trim, sexually attractive, dynamic, full of energy. And what we'll do is, we will show you how to get and jump this gap. We will show you how to get from where you are, overweight, to where you want to be, fit and trim. And we'll charge you for it. If a customer is convinced that it will work, the customer will pay almost anything. You know, it's interesting. Customers buy not products or services. In fact, customers don't even care what your product or service is. All they care is, what is the outcome, benefit, or result that I will enjoy after I use your product. Customers, of course, at the University of Chicago buy what they anticipate enjoying as a result. They anticipate, where will I be after this process? And that's what they buy. They buy the future. And your job is to paint, first of all, find out where they are, and then paint a beautiful future. Where are they today? Where can they be with your product or service? Now, the greatest of all values is transformation. People will pay a certain amount for a product or service, and they'll pay 10 or 20 or 100 times that to be transformed. To be transformed from where they are today to somewhere else completely. Which is why people pay enormous amounts for health programs and enormous amounts for financial planning programs, from financial problems and lack to financial independence. They will pay for a transformation. And if you can show them how you can help them to transform their situation from where they are to where they really want to be, then they lose all price sensitivity. They don't even care what it costs. Therefore, you always have to be asking, where's my next sale coming from, and who are the best people for me to talk to? In a very good qualifying process in lead acquisition, you simply ask a question that the person has to answer to demonstrate that they're a good prospect. Again, using weight loss, would you like to be thin, trim, and fit? If the person says no, then they're not a good candidate. If they say, absolutely, it's my biggest goal in life, then they're a very good candidate for your prospect. So good prospecting starts off with asking questions to make sure the person you're talking to actually is a good prospect. Don and I were talking earlier about the whole process of lead generation. And lead gen, as they call it, is really the essence of all of modern marketing. Your ability to market. And people sometimes ask, what's the difference between marketing and sales? Well, a very simple example that I use, I say, if you're talking to a group of people, you say, how many people here are hungry? And everybody raises their hand. That's marketing. They're saying, I have an interest in satisfying this need or taking away this problem. You say, now, I have a restaurant. Let me convince you, show you why it is in your best interest to come to my restaurant than going somewhere else. Interesting discovery in the research is that very often a good salesperson will say, this is a very good product and you should have it and it's cost effective and it'll make an enormous difference in your life. And then the prospect will go and buy it from a competitor. What on earth happened? Well, you didn't make the sale. You roused the need. You explained that the need could be satisfied. You did the marketing beautifully, but you did not make the conversion. You did not get them to buy from you. They went instead and bought from someone else. So lead generation and conversion rates are the keys to increasing your business by 21% or even more. Now with lead generation, there's a very simple ratio. It's quantity versus quality. Sometimes I'll say to salespeople is that if you want to double your sales, double the amount of customer contact that you make, double the number of people that you talk to, double the number of minutes that you spend face-to-face with prospects, and by the law of averages and by the law of probabilities, you'll double your sales. It's no great miracle. You'll find that the most successful salespeople in every industry engage in higher levels of call frequency. They simply call on more people. They talk to more people in the course of the day. If you're speaking to 5 people a day today, and you decide to speak to 10 from now on, you'll double your sales. And people come back to me all over the world. They say, I couldn't believe how easy it was to double my income. Instead of thinking of reasons to stay in the office and play on social media and talk to my friends and drink coffee and so on, is I just went out there and called on people and spoke to them. Increase the number of minutes. If you double the number of minutes you're spending face-to-face with customers, you will double your sales. Which brings us back to a very interesting question, which I thought was a little shocker. They said, what is the business of business? And the business of business is buying customers. We call this customer acquisition, and customer acquisition activities, customer acquisition expenses. Your business is to buy customers at a lower cost than those customers yield to you on a net basis in terms of profitability. Now, Don and I were also talking about the fact that you see these big companies and they announce they had hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in sales and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars. How on earth could they do that? They have so many billions of dollars in sales. How could they lose so much money? Answer, they paid more for their customers than they earned from their customers. Instead of doing the numbers very carefully, and there are companies that will go into, consulting companies go into a large company and show that probably at the end of the day, half of the products you sell you're losing money on. It's costing you too much to generate leads, too much to make the sales, you're having too many returns or customer dissatisfaction, it's costing you too much money to fulfill the order, and so on, and that you maybe making the sales, but at the end of the day, you're losing money on every one. You know, the old saying, we lose money on every sale, but we make it up on the volume. Only about half of your products and services are really profitable, and of those, there's about 3 that are the most profitable of all. And many companies are absolutely shocked. They are spending all of their money, billboards, advertising, radio, television, and so on, and they're shocked to find that they're losing money on every sale after they have deducted every single direct and indirect expense. So what you do is you find out what are my most profitable products and services, and what are the most profitable customers for me, the ones who most appreciate what I sell and will buy the soonest, and how can I find or contact more of them? And this all involves thinking. So we say that prospecting is the most important part of selling, and the first question you ask is, where is my next sale coming from? And again, all the grown-up companies think about sales all day long. And I was listening to an interview with Jack Welch, and he would say that they pay their people very well, but the top 10% of people get $1 million bonuses each year. And the top 10% of people are measured numerically, mathematically, on the basis of performance. And they're absolutely crystal clear. Did you hit your numbers? Did you get your numbers? How many calls did you make? How many sales did you make? How many dollars did you generate? How much profit did you generate from the sales of those products and services? And so on. And they hammer them. The big companies hammer these numbers every single day. So everyone in the company knows is that it's sales, sales, sales. You've got to make sales. You've got to bring home the bacon. And if you don't, you will very quickly be replaced by someone who will. And once you have a performance-driven culture, in this case a sales performance-driven culture, it's astonishing what happens in your business. So we say the top 10% of people open 80% of the new accounts. And the top 10% of people are called hunters. And these are people who go out into any market and they can find business. And if you want to be successful, you have to become a hunter. You have to be very, very aggressive to sell in a very competitive market. You have to be willing to bounce back from continuous rejection in order to finally get to those people who can and will buy from you. So we say that there are prospects everywhere, but they're not your prospects. So what are the characteristics of a good prospect? By the way, there are people who charge several $100s a day per person just to teach salespeople how to sort good prospects from poor prospects. Well, a good prospect has several qualities. Number one is they have a real need for what you're selling. We just sometimes joke, let us say you sell fire extinguishers and a person's hair is on fire. That's a good prospect. They need your product. And when do they need your product? They need it now. In other words, they have a real, genuine need. And so you say, who are the prospects in my marketplace who need my product immediately? Because here's an interesting discovery. Immediacy lowers cost resistance. It lowers price sensitivity. The more I want it, the more I'm willing to pay for it immediately. No questions. The second is a good prospect has the power and the authority to make a buying decision. Some of the best research work on selling, called strategic selling, customer-centric selling, customer-oriented selling, starts off with this. It's called access to power. Access to power. I really like the word. In other words, you are talking to the person who can make the buying decision. And if you're not, you've got to get past that person to the person who can. There's no point in your making a wonderful presentation and developing an intimate, lifelong relationship with the person who does not have the authority. So the big focus on the most successful companies is get to the decision maker. Find out who the decision maker is. In our seminars, we teach people when you're talking to someone in a company, you say, who else in addition to you would be involved in making this decision? It's a very strategic question because the person could say, nobody else, I make the decision myself, which is great. Or they'll say, well, it has to go through the vice president of marketing or the owner or somebody else. That's the one that you have to get to. If you cannot get to the decision maker, then in the main you're wasting your time. So make sure that you know in advance that the person you're talking to is the power and the authority. If they like what you're talking about, they can say yes right now. A third quality of a good prospect is they like you. And this is really important. That's why we say that listening builds trust and likability. So the more questions you ask about the customer and their business and what they're doing and how it's working, the more time you take to understand the customer in advance, the examination or diagnosis phase, the more they like and trust you, and the more open they are to you to buy. So therefore, take the time, ask the questions, listen carefully. Shakespeare said, make haste slowly. In other words, go very, very slowly at the beginning, and the research shows that the longer you take at the beginning before you ever talk about your product or service, the more likely it is that they will buy. Which brings us to a very interesting breakthrough. It's the difference between consultative selling, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, and what we call transactional selling. Transactional selling is to just sell a basic product or service, which more and more becomes commoditized. And commoditization takes place when the customer is convinced that what you sell and what somebody else sells and what everybody sells are all the same. If that's the case, the only question is how much is it? If you're looking at buying a bottle of wine or a bottle of beer or vegetables or anything else, it's a commodity. The only way that you differentiate a commodity from each other, because they're identical in nature, is by price. And the other part of selling is consultative selling. And this is where, and this is a wonderful way of putting it, you actually design the product with the customer, in front of the customer, in the conversation. In other words, you don't go in with any fixed ideas. You go in with a lot of knowledge and skill, but now what you do is like a doctor who has the ability to help a patient in many different areas. The first thing they do is they find out where and how. Is they don't lead with a prescription or with a recommendation. All they do is try to find out where can I be of the greatest help in taking away the pain. And the more time that you spend in this process, the easier the sale is. At a certain point, the customer will often say, well, what you got? I'll take it. And they will. So so they like you and they like your product. A good prospect can be a multiple purchaser. This is another example. When lead generation, you're looking for people who, if they buy once and they're happy, they can buy again and again. I'm working with customers that I've been working with for 30 years now, and they're still good customers of mine, and I'm still good customers of them, and we have done literally millions of dollars of business together from the get-go. From the first day, we have worked closely together. And so I look back on that and I say, wow, the beginning of that sales relationship was tremendous. It led to my life today. Now, I was just reading something about sales success on the internet before I began talking to you. And what I always say is think of the second sale even before you make the first sale. And what this said is think of the fourth sale before you make the first sale, which is just the same mentality. Is when you deal with this prospect, think in terms of a relationship sale. Think in terms of the long term. Think in terms of a consultative sale, where you're not selling a product and dropping it off on the doorstep and going home. You're actually going to work very closely with your prospect to install the solution, to solve the problem, to help them achieve the goal, and you're going to work with them hand in hand.